Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Mukerie. Just few words before leaving the floor today, Kiliho. It's an honor and a pleasure to have started with this program. And yeah, the topic of today will be energy efficiency. And I will give the floor suddenly to Dr. Ray Kiliho, that he will introduce himself and the activity. Sorry. Yeah, sure. Okay. Maybe you can open the microphone from the maybe the computer. Just one moment, Professor Kiliho, that we are like giving the floor to the register. Okay. I think yeah, he's joining here. Okay, perfect. We yeah, sure. Go ahead. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I think that now we can give the floor to Professor Kiliho, okay, Professor Murieke.
You will see my screen. Is it seen?
Yeah, you can put
Thank
also
you. Thank you.
the presentation mode.
Okay, yes. Let me just do that 1 second. Yeah. So, thank you for having me. I look forward to be sharing with you for I believe over 8 years, and by training professionally, I am an architectural technologist where I further went into speciality in resource efficient buildings and sustainable habitable spaces, which as well incorporates in issues of around water and electricity as sources of key energy. And so, as we approach this topic of energy, I wish to hide is it important, and then we will further go to the second component where we'll be looking at the challenges of energy access and then looking at parameters of energy efficiency. So, for your knowledge or for your information, climate change could result in poverty in the next 8 years. That climate change is contributing to our day-to-day life. And if I am to also recognize how this is elemental to energy, brings us to the conversation around sustainable energy. And energy is a golden thread in the modern, societal life. And it connects economic growth to increase social equity and development that allows the world to thrive. So we need energy from powering our houses, communication. We need energy for mobility. We need energy to cook our food. We need energy to keep our houses warm. So there's two major questions. There's an issue of energy access. So currently, 1 in 5 people on the planet lacks access to electricity. And on average, almost 3 billion people rely on wood, coal, charcoal, or animal waste for cooking and heating. So this is quite a big number, 3 billion people. That is just about a third of global population. And so there's a barrier. One of the barriers is, eradicating poverty. We cannot have that equation without thinking about energy all in itself. And then a parallel challenge, climate change. Climate change is an issue when we look at sustainable energy. So places where there is modern energy services and plenty of waste and pollution. But there's also an issue of anthropogenic emissions contributing to climate change. These are such contributors from it has impacts to the poor communities, because the poorest communities, the poorest people are being hit the worst. And so as this happens, as population grows, Also, I wish to bring to you the attention of the increasing and growing energy demand globally. So there is an increase, energy consumption grows by 37% annually, and 96% of the energy demand comes from developing countries. So this is expected to grow by, 2035, the energy demand need to meet our energy needs and as well as consideration for environmental concerns. There's also an issue in the energy sector. We understand climate emergency. We are supposed to be keeping our global temperature below 1.5 degrees, and that we have to do those efforts in the next 5 years. Otherwise, we could miss a threshold where we could go into a risky or challenging space in, reversing and reducing the impact of climate change. So one of the things around energy is the carbon footprint in the energy sector. So the carbon footprint, as we can see in this presentation, so this is a high-level presentation of carbon intensity per GDP. And as we can see the circles, these are attributed by, yes, yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, let me do something. The screen, yeah, sure, sure. Okay. Okay. You see the screen? Okay, 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 fantastic. Well, let me just go to that slide real quick. Do you see the carbon intensity page still? Is it visible? Okay. I mean, do you see the presentation on global growing demand? Is it visible? Global. Okay, okay. So let me just see the PowerPoint directly. Yeah. Okay. So let me wonder. Is it? Okay. Okay. So we are on the global growing demand, right? Perfect. So I think the screen, I hope it is fully integrated into the visual. So yeah. So the growing populations, and then proposed to grow to 100% by 100% by 2050. And so one of the things that really the equation is we have to ask ourselves, how can we be able to meet the energy needs for everyone across the world in due time, to be able to power homes, to power businesses, and then to power the mobility. And so the graph, the illustration ahead of us now shows the rationale of energy consumption on built environments. So this is the energy consumption by sectors. So apparently, buildings consume 35% of all resource, 35%. And industry consume just about 31%, while transportation consumes 30%. So other sectors consume just about 4% inclusively. So what this shows us is there's quite a larger and substantial amount of energy consumed by buildings, by by industry, and by transportation, because these are the epitome and the fundamental sectors that support our day-to-day life. And so I wish to share with you this perspective, the scenarios to explore the energy transition. So now we have the equations around, decarbonization, the energy sector, which is, moving to more cleaner energy sources and more sustainable energy sources. But that has to be a process, and then that process is what is referred to as energy transition. So energy transition, as we can see on the graph, there has been quite a substantial growth in energy demand on itself. And so, business as usual, as we can see across this line here, this is around the midst of, 2015, around there. And then 2015, so we had this global attention to the climate emergency and climate crisis. And so there was so much strong emphasis around how do we, reduce carbon emissions. And carbon emissions, the larger part of it is contributed as a result of, power production. And power production is an attribute of our power usage. So the more there's a demand in our power consumption and power usage, and then we'll be using conventional means of energy, that means we would be forced to produce more and pumping more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So what we see here is a bit of a change, that now we have to be sure to keep our promise to not go beyond 1.5 degrees temperature by 2050. And so the chart shows the path that in order for us to meet the temperature goals, we have to be, to be sure that the relevant and relative power production also sinks into the ambition to how we're going to get to meet that target. And so there's changing structure of global energy demand. So primarily, we see there's an ambition to get to net zero. So net zero is a situation where the amount of carbon dioxide pumped into the surroundings is equal to the amount of carbon dioxide removed from the surroundings and from the air. So that is when we will have achieved net zero. And so there is the rapid. So rapid is where we have already had conventional energy sources that are easy. We have infrastructure in place, and then we're producing, a lot of energy. And there is the business as usual. So business as usual, this is where, the conventional means of energy, but are not transitioning to become more cleaner or reducing the footprint in their energy, in their energy footprint as a whole. And so this is on fossil fuels, and we can see on the next paragraph that the share of renewable energy as primary energy is growing rapidly. This signifies, the responsiveness of the community, the governments, and private sector to recognize the importance of why we need to transition ourselves to clean energy. And then we need to have a capability to scale clean and renewable energies. And so we can see there's quite substantial amount of pace between 2018 and towards 2025. I'm happy that a lot of conversations around the energy transition paradigm is happening seriously, and every stakeholder in this sector and is really looking into the potential solutions. But then there's issues of cost effectiveness. But then electricity demand as well is growing. So while we continue to look into the share of renewable energy as a share of reducing, means of producing power without, pumping a lot of carbon dioxide into the environment, we have to be keen that there's the demand for growing power and electricity. And this means as we continue to decarbonize and transition to more cleaner and renewable sources, we have to also be relevant with the growing demand. So this brings, on itself unique challenges, which I believe we have, we have both the incentives, the opportunity, and challenges to solve this challenge. So this is a bit of insights around renewable energy in power. So we can see like in the renewable energy in power, the larger part in long term, there's so much optimism around, by 2050, a substantial amount of share in energy and power and energy to be from geothermal and biomass. And this is, of course, for the characteristics of geothermal biomass to really be, the circular economy, the amount of, how the footprint amounts itself, and the capability to support, wide means of conventional, transformation of energy. So, and then there's another issue with wind. Wind energy, on the other way, is of course very effective, but there's still an issue of the cost of producing wind energy. And then what we can see here is the overall contribution in price as more technologies come to happen, as governments provide more incentives or regulation to really facilitate the adoption and transition of the sectors. We see that the price of solar and wind is expected to drop as adaptation and as we consume such energy and technologies at scale. And so the energy demand is something we've spoken about. We expect to be having substantial amount of growth and demand in three of the sectors, as we saw both of these sectors contribute to consumption of around 80% of all energy and resources produced globally. So these sectors support the essence of day-to-day life and the economies on itself. So the transportation sector is the biggest one. So I think there's an issue with looking into how our transportation and mobility, but also industry sector. This is how we produce our goods and services, as well. We have to keep up with human needs and demands, as well as buildings, as long as humanity continues to grow.
Ray, I'm requesting Ray. Sorry, Ray.
Yes.
Ray is there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
The
please.
slide is not moving actually. Only one slide is present. The slide is not moving.
Let me use the other mechanism. I think. Let me try switch that off. Maybe it could help. Let me see. One moment, please. One moment, please. Yeah. Let's see. Presentation slideshow. Do we see the electricity demand slide now? Is it visible? Is my screen visible? Like, do we see the? Can we see the slide?
No, sir. No, sir.
No, sir, no.
Can you see it now?
No, sir.
No. Okay. I think I am having a bit of a challenge on the integration of Google Hangout. Let me see if there could be another way to put it through. I don't know how. Let me maybe try to let me try do something else here. Or is it? Excuse me, I'm trying to see if this can work. Your entire screen.
Rupali, please stop your presentation. Rupali.
Yeah, maybe that one. Is it visible?
Yeah, visible.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Do we? Okay. So, do you see the slide with global power generation? Is that the one that you also see?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So, briefly before this slide, we were just looking at the electricity demand. I hope this one is also visible. So we were going through about some of the insights around the sectors that are big consumers of energy, and these are transportation sector and industry, and as well as buildings. And so this insight shows the need for growing and requirement for energy consumption and power generation, as well as the demand to meet net zero, where we will have more adoption of clean energies, as well as the use of renewable sources of energy, but as well as avail ourselves from business as usual. Business as usual in power, that means not relying to conventional power generation mechanisms that really are not so friendly into the modern requirements of energy production, and the environmental concerns. And so these technologies, we require a couple of technologies to really help balance this, the power sector. Some of these technologies are, batteries, that we have to have a, efficient means to store power when it's not used or required, or when it's produced. And then we have to have more technologies to balance power, in pumped hydro, and then as well as the capability to to demand response and scheduling. So when there's low consumption of power, when it is low peak, I think we have to have the capability to have technologies that can assist us in synchronizing with low production as well. And then there's an issue of technologies around hydrogen power production, as well as, of course, gas or core. But then the last component is bioenergy. Bioenergy to really see, the future of energy in bioclimatic energy means. And so now I think it's an opportunity, since we've had a bit of a brief around, climate issues with power. We've seen a bit of, the key sectors that consume tremendous amount of power, and the growing demand for power is, as population grows and economies need to function properly. It's an opportunity to look at energy efficiency. And energy efficiency is a requirement in the energy transition paradigm. So basically, energy efficiency means the use of less power to perform the same task. So though there is, of course, a better opportunity of energy efficiency, usually energy efficiency is comparable to renewable sources of energy. But then really energy efficiency is the capability to use less power to perform the same task, and eliminate the potential for energy waste. And so energy efficiency brings a variety of benefits in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, as well as reducing demand for energy imports. So sometimes the amount of energy produced could be at least in a capability of sufficiency for the net users, but because there's a lot of power loss and inconsistencies in efficiency of how that energy is being used, then it declines an opportunity for directing that energy to be used for other production and other economically viable means of use of such power. So which brings us to the question that, oh, we need to produce more power to meet up the demand. But then the question is how much energy is being lost due to inefficiencies is tremendously the largest amount of energy that if it could be captured, and we will look at some of the strategies to capture energy efficiency and implementing energy efficiency measures. So I think it will be very interesting. So renewable energy technologies also help in accomplishing these objectives because improving energy efficiency has to be cheap and then often has to be immediate. So the way to reduce dependency on fossil fuels is transition, obviously, to renewable energies. And then at this time, the whole equation of energy efficiency is more and more improved as compared to the currently available conventional means of producing energy. And so there's enormous opportunities for efficiency improvements in every sector of the economy, whether it is in the buildings, in the transportation, in industry, and the energy generation itself. So we've seen these are some of the greatest sectors that really consumes enormous amount of energy. And so one of the areas that we have an opportunity to implement energy efficiency is in our buildings. So buildings apparently do not consume energy on their own. So buildings consume energy as a relativity of our, our usage of the building. For instance, sometimes we could leave our room or office with a fan on or air conditioning or with the light on, even when it is not in use. That keeps up a constant demand and usage of power. But then if we could be, cutting off the power that we do not need, I think that is some of the opportunities and strategies to really reduce, our consumption, power consumption ability. And so the incorporation of such technologies, small steps, for instance, using light emitting diode light bulbs instead of the incandescent bulbs, fluorescent bulbs, which consume relatively more amount of energy for the same output of energy as compared to LEDs. These are very effective in ensuring energy efficiency in buildings. The other component in buildings, there's the issue of insulation. So for geographies that there's an issue a requirement for insulation, it means you're forced to produce more heat in the house to keep yourself warm during winters. But then if the insulation is not very effective, so a distinctively large amount of power would be lost. So that power, if was to be maintained, I think would provide a very efficient amount of power required to keep everyone warm. The same applies to areas that are hot, humid climate, where you need more cooling power. So design strategies for buildings, for instance, having more designs that allow, natural ventilation are more important to the equation of energy efficiency. So to really use energy where it is needed the most and that can be used effectively. The second part is the energy generation and distribution. So 33% up to 80% is the increase in energy is enormous, and there's a lot of energy wasted during the inefficiencies in production and inefficiencies in transmission as well. So this is where the equations, for instance, smart grid comes in, where we have to be able to have more insulated or efficient means of transmitting and distributing that power. So to reduce any power and energy loss along the way, because we consume resources to produce that energy, and then if that energy does not get to the required functionality, it means we've lost not just resources, but then we've lost valuable energy that can be used. So in the energy generation and distribution component, there is a whole lot of opportunity to see how to strengthen the energy efficiency at that part. So the other one is the community design. So our neighborhoods, our cities, our towns, our the places where we stay and work. I think they have to be designed in a way that we consume less energy. If you remember, um, more energy is used also in transportation as well. So if we have cities that people can work more freely, there is accessibility to work, and and includes such things, and cycling to from one point to the other, and do not to use combustion means of of mobility, for instance, the use of vehicles that could use fossil fuels, that reduces the substantial amount of environmental impact of carbonization from mobility sector, but as well as it is good for our health. It keeps people together. It helps create that kind of esteem that we need to be able to sustain our healthy livelihoods. And so vehicles as well, we have seen very recent you know advancement in technology and industry to production and improvement of electric vehicles. I think this is where the efficiency of electric vehicles, if you go into the mechanism to how they function compared to engines vehicles, I think there's substantial amount of not only moral question of reducing emissions from transportation and mobility sector, but also connecting the value chains of renewable energy and clean energy throughout the transmission and usage of energy. It be in efficient means to light our homes, to to cool our homes, to cool our offices, or if it is to move from point A to point B. And the fifth component is freight. So we need to be looking at how means to move freight more efficiently, and this brings the equation of mass movement of freight, such as the use of rail and truck transportation, and not using more personalized carriages that really provides more customization and personalization into how freight is being moved, but then looking into the whole dimension and equation of how freight can be moved at mass scales. And lastly, it is the human behavior. So there's four stages above improving efficiency, primarily through technology, of course, and design. But then the way people ourselves, how we use energy and technology, significantly impacts the amount of resources that we use. For instance, we've seen this, possibly we've seen this equation sometimes, that you are in a space and then it's broad daylight, and then you have just enough light in the room, and then you just decide to power on your light, your electric light, even when you think you could just use natural lighting. So when such of these deficiencies are our human behaviors. For instance, we've seen examples where people would be maybe out of their vehicles, even though they're electric vehicles, but then they would not, turn off their electric vehicles. That means they would keep them up and running, and then that means they're consuming energy. And so when you consume energy unnecessarily, it means you will have to recharge that energy back. That means you're putting more pressure into the production capability. So the question is, how does driving behavior and unnecessary idling impact guys' mileage? How many people will use public transportation if there is a cultural stigma against it? So I think there's a need to look at a very personal level that whatever inefficiencies, despite that technologies can help us improve, but then our behavior is significant in the equation to how energy can be efficient, and looking into the whole sector and paradigm shift all at large. And so I would like to share, this quote by Mahatma Gandhi, he said, and I quote, a technological society has two choices. First, it can wait until catastrophic failures expose systemic deficiencies, distortion, and self-deceptions. But secondly, a culture can provide social checks and balances to correct the systemic distortion prior to catastrophic failures. What this means is there's an issue of some of us maybe have been privileged to have an opportunity to access energy. So there could be an issue of abuse. We've seen the example for the opportunity to meet energy efficiencies from our human behavior into how we interact with appliances, we interact with some of the mechanisms that consume power. So just as much as we need to have a more energy sufficient economy, I think there's also an issue into are we conscious about the future of our environments, that we need to have more cleaner and more renewable and more sustainable means of power? So I think this is very important for us personally at very personal capacities to reflect on how we interact in our role in the whole question of climate change, whether is by the way we think we do know or when we think we do not know. And lastly, I would like to share a couple of questions with you. There's 5 key questions about energy that we need to ask ourselves. And, most of you are involved in a lot of initiatives. I've had Professor Mukre have been sharing that you do all and involved in all these amazing things. And so I like to share with you some of these questions, for us to synthesize and look at what is our role, what is the role of our government, what's the role of the private sector and businesses. And so the first one is currently around 1.3 billion people are living without access to modern energy. There's a question if, can we connect them? And then the question is how. So I think this is an interesting area. It also provides opportunity, for our careers to explore more about, the whole equation of energy accessibility. In talking of energy accessibility, we must talk of energy availability, of course, production availability, and then transmission, and then access, and then financing. So there is all of these equations along the value chain. The second one is, can we use energy more efficiently? I think we've seen some of the examples around energy efficiency. So is the whole equation to reduce the ratio of energy to GDP? So this would be around maybe having more defragmented means of energy sources, maybe if, individual or small scale energy production, there may be mini grids or mini hydros. The third question is, most of the world's power still comes from burning carbon. Can we substantially decarbonize? Because on the decarbonizing process, there's the whole issue of economic sustenance. While just as much we need to transition into clean energies, but then it cannot be just like that. It has to be a transition. And so looking into the sequence of transition, what are the key things that we have to really, come in and ask ourselves and push our governments and private sector to really look into these areas meaningfully? The fourth, can we optimize resources by creating regional electricity grids? So we could be aware that, individual countries can have the sustenance of the power they produce and that which they need for their, inland usage. So there has to be an issue if you have maybe capability to produce more clean power than a country that has, limited capability to produce clean and sustainable energy. I think extending that regional power grids can bring an opportunity to decarbonize the sector and, improving energy access to millions of people. So I think these conversations are important to really happen. And the last one is, while energy is important, there's an issue of cost of energy. It has to be low enough to allow us to produce such energy, but then sustain the economic growth. And so this marks the end of my presentation. I think if we could have more time, we would talk about some things more specifically, but I hope you've picked a thing or two. I wish to now see if you have any contributions or if you might perhaps have any questions on something specific. I'm happy to respond to anything that we've seen in any of the presentation. I thank you for your attention and having the time to listen to this. I think I should bring back the podium to Dr. Domenico or Professor Mukrev for the next steps. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
তোমাদের কোনো কোশ্চেন থাকলে করতে পারো।
Sorry?
তোমরা বাংলাতে বলো, কোশ্চেন করো, আমি ট্রান্সলেট করে দিচ্ছি। আদারওয়াইজ ছোটখাটো ইংলিশে বলতেই পারো, জিজ্ঞেস করো কোশ্চেন যদি কারোর থাকে। Have you any question, anybody? So
And
please
then
ask.
I will also share the slide with Professor Mukre and Domenico. So if you could also share with the colleagues, I think they would love to to look at it. I'm happy to share it as well.
Yes, sure. Thank you. Sure.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
So anybody else want to make any question or any explanation about the energy or sustainability?
Good evening, sir.
Yeah. You can.
Sir, can we turn into 100% renewable energy in what time will take it?
Yeah, I think, thank you for, it is really a good question. So I believe, yes, we can turn to 100% renewable energy. The renewable energy sources available, I think, provide an enormous amount of opportunity for us to tap them. But, we have not been doing that just quite as much. So I think we can, and I believe how much time, I think, the concerns of, keeping temperature below 1.5 degrees, I think brings us back, the whole question of it is an issue of our governments, it is an issue of the private sector, it is an issue of we ourselves as energy consumers to really take active role in this equation into potential, transition to energy. For instance, I'll give you one of the example. We as consumers, we may come at a point where we might say, hey, I think I would like to connect my home to a power source that is from a renewable source. So if maybe a producer, if there is no monopoly, I think we could choose to abstain, power sources that really has, a big footprint in their production. So it could take some time, depending on how much we, the private sector and the government really push this. But I'm happy that the compensation and everything is, happening at enormous amount of content, and I'm sure we will make a lot of progress as we get along. Thank you. I agree. I think you raised a very important point. Thank you so much for adding that through. Appreciate it.
So, anybody else? Have you any question from a student?
Thank you, sir.
So, yeah. So, I think there is no question. So, I would like to invite Dr. Sudeep Bhuin, who is the coordinator of National Service Scheme in India and our in SW University. So, for making the vote of thanks. And uh, from my end, a very thank you, Ray. And lastly, you said the Mahatma Gandhi's, the quoted the Mahatma Gandhi's talking. So the NSS, National Service Scheme, actually the idea of Mahatma Gandhi for mobilizing the youth in our country. So it is the base of Mahatma Gandhi actually. So thank you. And of course, Dr. Domenico is very much, we will make another program very shortly, I think. And Ray is requesting join our next program. So Dr. Bhuin is present here.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you can make the vote of thanks, please.
So it is very good and effective platform to share our opinion and learning from the abroad scholars. And our students also very much learning efficient, and they also interested in these issues. And in our regular activities, they also participate in tree plantation and caring of tree plantation, and also create awareness in our rural areas to make efficient the people, environment friendly, social behavior, and also a good community. Now I am very much thankful to get this platform from Priya Mukherjee, our NSS program officer, and also an international scholar in environmental sciences. And also I am very much thankful to our beloved registrar. Uh, he is also a zoologist, and also he is very fond of the social activities in related to the environmental protection and energy consumption, etc. And he also gave us his time from very busy schedule. And I am also very much thankful to Climate Social Forum, especially Dr. Domenico Vitro, for his valuable speech this time. And also I am very much thankful the Commonwealth Youth Councils, Rai Kiliho, and very lucid lecture and we got from you. And we also learn from you the energy waste, greenhouse problem, energy efficiency, how we can make us the more energy efficiency consumption, and how we can equip us from the knowledge, from the devices, and how we can avoid the problems of efficiency. And social behavior also is very much important point, because our behavior is the main factors to control our energy consumption, to control the pollution, and IPCC also has great initiatives about the social behavior. And we know in the earliest period of human evolution, then the behavior is very much friendly with the ecological setup of then world, nearly back from 2 lakh and more years. But along with the development of technological apparatus and technological knowledge, we use many much devices also. These devices, first we innovate, and first the technologists make the devices to make people's life comfort and to people life safe, and our long life. But the devices at the after
Sure.
that, it's proved that the many problems also they rise. So devices are responsible for pollution, devices responsible for energy waste, And also, Rai also mentions the production, transition, and utilization of energy. So it is a very good platform, and I hope that our volunteers also very much learned from this platform, and they also carry forward their knowledge to their practices. And also another the media friends also, I express my thanks to them also to give this contribution in social media, and who will in future to support our contribution and efforts. So it is very good time to us, and I thankful to all of my volunteers. The volunteers also, they have their valuable time in their researches and their studies in their personal life, but they come with us for sharing their opinion or learning, listening, and actually they give their time for the sufficient energy sufficient economy and the better energy efficient world. So thank you very much to all of you to be with us, and I hope in future we meet again in another platform. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
sir. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, of course. Sure, sure. We can close the session. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. We are ready.
Thank you,
We are
sir.
ready to physically be with us and involved in our future activities also,
Looking
and
forward to it.
collaboration and other things.
Thank you, sir. Okay, bye. Bye.